What? Huh? Shadow's my best friend. Shadow's my best friend. Shadow's my best friend. He's my best friend. Shadow's my best friend. Shadow's my best friend. Shadow's my best friend. He's my best friend, and I love him so much. Shadow. Hey, welcome back to Sonic Weekly. Cross that out. X it out. Shadow Weekly. Shadow Generations. We're hyped. You've made it. We've talked about it for months. Now, some of us have played it. We're going to talk about it. Hold your dang horses. We'll get there. I'm Grant. Welcome back to the show. Bo's here. Hi, Bo.
Here we go, buddy. Hey, that is a thematically appropriate song reference for this episode.
And we're not always joined by our usual editor and producer of the show, but he's with us this week. Welcome back, Smoovies. Hi, Smoovies.
Hey, I've been upgraded to producer. Producer Smoovies. What's up, everyone?
Yeah, pro Smoovies. And the star of the show remains the man from out of the shadows into the spotlight, David the Lurker. Hi, David.
Whoa, hi Grant, hi Bo, hi Smoovies. That's right, we've got a packed house. It's because when Shadow shows up, everyone comes crawling out of the woodwork.
He's the coolest. And of course, the big news this week, obviously we don't want to bury the lead on this too much, David, is the Burning Rangers vinyl. I believe it's vinyl. 30th
anniversary, not of Burning Rangers, but of the Sega Saturn itself. It's the second of the discs to be issued with new songs and new arrangements. The first one being Sega Rally.
Whoa!
So if you love your classic Sega music, you can get Sega Rally, and you can get Burning Rangers on vinyl. You get a new karaoke version of some of the tracks. You get some new vocals with Takanobu Mitsuyoshi. It's guaranteed to be a great 28 minutes or however long the runtime is.
And this has been the spark lighting the fire of Sonic team excitement across the internet far and wide, along with the release, the actually pre-release of Sonic X Shadow Generations. Feels like it's been out all week, but unlocked. Well, first it leaked. It was out in the wild physically. And then, of course, as usual, it was cracked somehow, the codes, and those started to trickle out there. And then it was unlocked digitally Monday at 9 o'clock. We record Thursdays, so it actually comes out technically tomorrow, but it feels like it has been out all week, in part because it has been out all week. And then we've all been looking forward to it. But unusual to this rollout, because we've seen that pattern before, but unusual this time is that this time it was smooth. We weren't hearing about game-breaking bugs or glitches. We were hearing positive reviews, very positive reviews. In fact, the reviews right now, Metacritic, it sits at 80. 80! That's maybe, you have to double check me on this, I think that's the highest 3D Sonic Metacritic for a console game since Sonic Adventure 2 on the Dreamcast. There have been high Metacritic scores for mobile handheld games, Sonic Pocket Adventure, Sonic Advance, Sonic Rush. For console games, I think you have to go as far back to the Dreamcast. And then a 9 from IGN, and same thing. I think that claim holds true for both. So very positive reception to this game from the internet. But I think, again, that's really
reissues.
Yeah, they love reissues, and they love the new Burning Rangers soundtrack.
Yeah, I'm checking Metacritic because I'm like, oh, what could it be? Right, Heroes had a 72. Frontiers
is around 70.
74 was our guess at.
That's right.
Release.
I forgot Frontiers was that low. I'm like, really? Wow. Yeah. Colors Ultimate was a 74. Generations, the original Generations, has a 77 on Metacritic. Colors had a 78. So Forces 57. Like, we're going all around the place. Ultimate of Sonic the Hedgehog has an 82. That's interesting. Yeah, like,
it's been a while. It's been a while since the critics have kind of universally said this is a good Sonic game. Even, and it's, it is a remaster, it's a reissue, and then it's also a new game. It's two games. It's Sonic Generations and it's Shadow Generations.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic 3 and Knuckles comes in 2 cartridges, but it's one game. Sonic and Shadow Generations, Sonic X Shadow Generations, one package, 2 games. That's how it works. But let's first just establish also, not all of us have played it. Not all of us have played it to completion. I started playing immediately when it unlocked on my Xbox. I went back and forth between the campaigns, Sonic and Shadow. More on that in a second. But I have completed, not 100% completed, but completed both Sonic and Shadow before the game releases. That's where I'm at. David, how about you?
Right. I've beaten all of the shadow side, right? It unlocked at 9. I was like, okay, it's time to go. I have had such a time with controllers, which have nothing to do with Sega. It all has to do with me. In the middle of playing Shadow Generations, my long-standing, loving Logitech 310, which is not the one that piloted Ocean Gate, but is its wired companion. I believe it was a wireless version on Ocean Gate.
Thanks for that. Yeah, appreciate it.
I had to throw in some tragedy.
We're all wondering.
It decided to die on me. The cord, I've had this, I feel like, for at least 10, 15 years. It finally ripped. And what happens when it rips? You can't use it anymore. So, yeah. So I was switching around. I finally was able to figure out I have an Xbox One controller. This has nothing to do with the game. I've beaten Shadow the Hedgehog. I haven't finished the Sonic side yet, so I haven't seen whatever the brand new ending is, and by brand new I mean just what words
the
were
dialogue
changed.
changes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that too.
So I've spent about 15 hours because I was like, I need to beat Shadow. I need to see it from beginning to end. I've been playing around in it. There's a lot in there. There's a lot to talk about, but that's where I am.
Okay. Bo, how about you, sir?
I promised my older son, Modern Bo, named after Sonic Generations, that I would play it with him when we would have a block of time to do it. So that's going to be Saturday afternoon while his younger brother, Modern Tails, is sleeping. And so haven't touched it yet. It's downloaded and ready, and we're going to do it. I made a promise to him. My promise to him is like slightly more committing to me than my promises to you guys. So
yeah, it's fair. It's comparable to Shadow's promise to Maria. So we can't begrudge you for not yet playing a game that hasn't officially released yet. That's completely fair. Smoovies, what about you? Did you play it already, or are you waiting?
Oh, I have so played it. In fact, I have played it so much that I've shared many, many screenshots with Grant. He was having trouble reading Gerald's diary. Turns out, diary's in the game. It's not just in the physical version. So I'm so happy I did not get the physical so I could play it early. Oh, man. But yeah, you can transcribe it in the game. And Gerald's diary has like torn pages. They're completely transcribed. You can read them completely if you just press that read button on the game.
You have to collect each of the pages, though, individually from the hub. And so I had collected most, but not all of the pages. So it was very nice of you to share and fill in the gaps that I hadn't read of Gerald's journal. One of the big lore pieces is Gerald's journal. There was also, we talked about Dark Beginnings as well. There's a lot of new lore and story, and there's fixes and tweaks in the lore and story to the Sonic Generation side. But there's also the game itself. And then I guess we'll ask Bo, because how much should we spoil you? What do you care about hearing or not hearing? And we'll follow that.
I am completely fine with being spoiled on this. I've played Sonic Generations. I know that story pretty well. That's actually the one that brought me back in. Like, I played Mania in 2019 when Plus came out, but that didn't bring me back in. But Generations brought me back in, and that's fresh in my memory. But the Shadow one, you can tell me.
I have a question for you though, Bo. Like, when's the last time, or has a Sonic game ever made you tear up before?
Ooh, good question. I don't think I teared up at, let's say, Sage's arc in Sonic Frontiers. So, what's before that? Sonic and Shadow going super. I feel like that will well up in your throat at any point, right?
Because this is the latest iteration to make me do that. I mean, maybe you don't want to be spoiled for that. I mean, there's some really good moments at the end.
I am shocked to hear that there's good writing going on in a Sonic game. This is wonderful, wonderful news. I will tell you, just as a brief aside, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but for the Sonic 30th anniversary, they did a commercial for like the Sonic games that had just like dad playing a game with his kid, and then other people being like inspired by Sonic. And one of them was a guy like in high school cross country running, and he stumbles and he's down in the dirt and he looks up and he sees a path of rings. And that spoke to me just at a profound level. Just like, yeah, I got choked up looking at that because, oh man, I ran cross country in high school. And yeah, I fell in a ditch once in a race and I had to decide whether to, give up or keep going. I did not hallucinate Sonic items, but if I had, maybe it would have been more
Metaphorically,
fun.
right?
Yeah.
You were kind of inspired by the will of your friend Sonic, the spirit of Sonic, Mary Garnett's creation.
That's right.
Okay, so how about this? If we wait and talk about lore next week, I think that would maybe be fine and a good way to split it up, because you can spoil lore, but if we just talk about our gameplay impressions, Bo, you're still going to have your opinion one way or the other of when you play it. So maybe let's start there. And if we get to lore, maybe we'll save that more for next week. Although I do know that Smoovies maybe wants to get into it as well. But let me start off with this. A little bit of a hot take to start off with. I think that for one thing, switching between Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations, you see that Sonic Generations is an older game. It doesn't control as well as the Shadow Generations part.
Oh, yeah.
Where Shadow is much tighter, much more intuitive, much more, it just feels natural. The levels feel wider, bigger, more of what you sort of want from. It makes me excited for Frontiers too. But here's my hot take. I think I still prefer Frontiers at the end of the day to Shadow Generations, because the smaller white space void hub world that you get to play around in Shadow is cool. It does seem like that Bowser's Fury expansion of it, but I want the Mario Odyssey 2, which also doesn't exist yet. I want the Sonic Frontiers 2 to come and keep building it, because that's such clearly the right way. And Sonic Generations still is great. It does hold up, but it also reminds you a little bit of Sonic Unleashed, which is good too, according to Smoovies, and some people, not to me, but it that has its own kind of appeal. But I found that the best way to play it, what I might recommend, is play through Sonic Generations, play through that 4-hour experience, and then play Shadow Generations. Or if you just do what I did, or go it backwards, just expect that it will be a little more awkward if you don't have Sonic Generations deeply embedded in your DNA. If you do, then it will make no difference. But if you're kind of new, or if you've only played it a little bit, it might feel awkward to go between the two. It definitely felt awkward to me at first, because the double jump in Sonic Generations is not a double jump. It's an air dash forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
The double jump in Shadow is the Colors or Frontiers, where it gives you a vertical boost, and then it really is a separate button to homing attack. Not the case in Sonic.
Mm-hmm.
So again, my hot take is Frontiers. I still love it. It's still maybe my favorite, though this was excellent. I feel like maybe the score should be swapped. Frontiers got a bad deal. If you add all the DLC to it, that's the 9, baby. Frontiers is the 9.
Well, I think you could split the difference and say maybe they should just have the same rating.
They're both 8s.
They're both. I was going to say they're both 9s. Just make them both.
Well,
9.
should this have been DLC for a paid DLC for Frontiers? Is my question. Like, does it make sense as a Generations add-on, or does it feel more of a Frontiers thing?
It definitely makes sense as a Generations add-on, and I would say, although I prefer Frontiers as one singular game, this package of 2 games is probably the very best Sonic product you could buy with money. It is an excellent introduction to the series, and that the fact that I would say it gets better with Frontiers is even more reason to not start with Frontiers, because Frontiers also has flaws and is bad in a ton of ways and deserves to be a 7. Like,
oh, okay.
That's also true.
You just said it was a 9.
It is a 9, but the fact and the reality is, outside of my imagination, like the fact is, it is a 7.
Okay.
Right. I mean,
I do want to drop
just
in
saying-
here the audio of you saying that Frontiers is better than the 16-bit games when Frontiers first came out. Like, you're an enthusiast for the recent stuff, which I respect.
I definitely am. I do like the shiny new thing, but that's what I'm saying here. Of like, I'm keeping that a little bit in perspective this time. Of this is the best entry point, I think, the Generations game.
Mm-hmm.
But Frontiers there's just that freedom of being able to, like, for the very first time, run in a big open field, even if it's an awkward, ugly, weirdly loading empty field, is such a thrill that I can't wait for more of that. And Shadow gives you more of a hint of that, so that when Sonic Generations you go back to that corridor roller coaster based gameplay, you can feel the limitation a little bit.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it is a little hard to judge between Frontiers and Shadow Generations because, like, yeah, Shadow Generations is inherently, like, it is shorter, it's more compact. There were a couple moments mechanically where I did think about, like, Odyssey versus Bowser's Fury and Frontiers versus Shadow Generations. Just little things like the UI, the map. Like in Odyssey, it's like, oh, like I remember going from Odyssey to Bowser's Fury and interacting with the map of Mario, being like, why is Bowser's Fury's map not as good? Like, for whatever reason, like it was something about
That's
the zooming in or what,
true.
like there was something about the map that isn't there, even though it is in Odyssey.
And
And
the
the same,
shadow map is considerably worse.
yeah, it's the
in
same
Frontiers.
thing. Yeah, because
Yeah.
like in Frontiers, you can zoom in and out really nicely. In here, it's like you see the whole thing, or you just automatically zoom into a bit, and you can't move it. And I'm like, there's another stick. You could let me move it, or it
Yeah.
doesn't tell you what the icons are.
Right.
So
I was going to say, I don't think there's a key.
there is
right?
no key.
There's no
Frontiers
legend.
has keys up the wazoo, if you think about it. But there's no key for the map. So it's little things like that where I'm like, why is the map worse? It doesn't deter from like the enjoyment of the game, because I think the game is very fun. And if we're holding back story and lore for next time, I do want to say, like, I really did enjoy the story. And
Me
like
too.
I think the whole package is great. Like Smoovies, you mentioned tearing up. Like I did tear up at Frontiers, and I did tear up a couple times
The
in this
pinball
game.
stage doesn't count for tearing up. That's
Oh,
what
okay.
triggers the sadness.
Well, it felt like I was, passing a stone during that part. So it was no, but yeah, like it is, but also, like, when you're talking about going back and forth between Sonic and Shadow, like I did all of Shadow Generations, and I went back to Sonic, and there's that moment where I'm like, oh, I wish they had like rebuilt White Space from the ground up and given us another little island to explore with Sonic. I know, like, switching between classic and modern, and like they weren't going to spend the amount of time to rebuild it. But it's
Yeah.
like, if you wanted to keep the old one, that could be Classic's hub world, and then if you jump to modern, he gets the little, sphere that he jumps around in, and it would make it would complement the two, because yeah, there is that 13-year gap where they've learned so many things since Generations came out, and Generations is still fun, but like there's so much, like, Shadow Generations looks better, it feels better, like it just all around, and like I really wish you could, if they had modified more of Sonic Generations, which sounds weird because I'm all about like maintaining the original, which then goes,
Well,
well, you should just add both.
I just want to quickly underline one thing that you said is like a thing that you get the feeling of with Shadow Generations, and then especially when you compare it to Sonic, is that in Shadow it just feels like they've put it all together. And in
Yeah.
Sonic Generations, you can just see it's a little earlier in the timeline.
Yeah.
But Shadow Generations, it's like, oh my god, this is both boost and adventure gameplay, somehow the best of both worlds. And the
did they
2D
really not-
levels are great too. They're the best, like they're as good as the best 2D mission levels in Colors, which is like the other high bar for those, I would say.
Yeah.
Did they not touch the Sonic side of the Generations? Like, did they fix any of the bad Time Eater boss, or the bad Egg Dragoon boss, or the bad? No,
those are
damn.
exactly the same. They did
They
add a
added
drop
Chow.
dash, which and the Chow. The drop dash feels bad. Doesn't.
It's not the Forces drop dash. Forces drop dash is pretty good.
I don't know.
There's
I haven't loved it yet so far in
know.
this.
I guess it feels a little glued in. Like it's fine, but the drop dash in Frontiers does feel a little nicer, just because it feels like it was more natively, we know how to go in there while they're just taking, like, the Sonic Generations, it is still essentially like in the original Hedgehog engine, right? Like, there is that moment when you load it up and you see like, oh, here's the two title screens. What are you going to pick? If you go Shadow, you seamlessly enter that. Like, that's part of the full package. When you go to Sonic, that at least on my setup, there's like that little flash where you're entering a completely different program. Like
Yeah.
you're
Yep.
you're going somewhere else. And because of that, they didn't change as many things as they could have. They can fiddle with it, but they certainly weren't going to like completely restructure it. And so I guess it's like, the drop dash is fine in Sonic Generations. There is no drop dash in Shadow. Shadow's got he doesn't need that. He's the ultimate life form. He can just warp. Like there's like a lot of little details. Like even just the homing attack for Shadow is different than Sonic because he's not shooting through the sky. He's doing a warp. He's doing a chaos control. It's a little neat.
See,
little neat
that's
thing.
really cool because like it could physics wise be the exact same controls, but if the animations are different enough, your experience is going to be different. And I saw people talk about the Terios skin, the Shadow original concept drawing, and people saying, "Oh, this feels cool how they made it control differently." And somebody said, "Well, no, it's all the same stuff. It's just different animations." But I think that's like actually fundamentally different because you're going to respond to it differently depending on what you see on the screen.
The animations are great for Shadow, and also for Sonic. When Sonic appears in Shadow's campaign, it is the Frontiers model of the character, and he's just animated a little better than when you see the same version of the scene in Sonic Generations.
Yep.
Yeah, I think watching the cutscene where they're like, "Hey, remember the Sonic and Shadow boss?" That cutscene makes that boss fight so much cooler because then when I jump back to Sonic, I was like, "All right, you collect 2 orbs, and then you just like run into Shadow's butt for a while," which I guess is why
The goal is really unclear in that.
right. And I'm like, "Oh man, they made this fight so much cooler on the other side."
I'm the coolest.
And you don't even get to play it.
No, you don't.
So let's talk about the levels, the main levels, and we can talk about the missions too. The missions, I'll say quickly that I like them more than the missions in Sonic Generations. They're a little simpler.
Mhm.
They don't have like extra characters. Like there's no Charmy Bee throwing rings at you, or a race to collect the Chow against Cream the Rabbit, or fighting music notes with DJ Vector the Crocodile.
Ah.
Or shining the spotlight on Espio the Chameleon. There's none of that. It's more just like race to the finish, and sometimes you have one ring, or like you have it wants you to use chaos control more.
Right. There's no mission where it's like, stop Maria from getting shot.
Yeah, if only, which Shadow desperately wishes there was. Okay, without getting too much into the lore too, though, I was also thinking about our chat last week with Jeffrey, and like he was talking about how his style of writing and his preferences for games that really connect the story with what you, the player, have just experienced. And that's kind of not the case for most of Shadow Generations. Like the conversations and the lore are about events that you don't see in this game.
Yeah, all of his examples of like what not to do are like, oh yeah, that's what the Sonic series does.
Yeah. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Sonic's a rebel. He doesn't need to follow those rules.
Yeah. Okay, so there's Space Colony Arc, and then stage 2 is Rail Canyon, and then it is Kingdom Valley, and then freaking
Sunset
Heights, Chaos Island, and Radical Highway.
Right. So that's 7.
So what's the biggest glow up here? Like in original Generations, obviously, Crisis City goes from whatever it is in 06 to playable.
Yeah, that's
Is Rail Canyon better? That's my question. Like Rail Canyon to me is the point at Heroes where I thought, man, this is not working for me.
I felt like that was the weakest one here too.
I think it's better. It's definitely better. Like in original Heroes Rail Canyon, I feel like you could sneeze and you're going to die in that game, in that level. Here, yeah, it is a lot of rails over nothing, but I think it's because they've figured out how rails work since Heroes. You feel a lot more in control, and not that you're just going to immediately fall into the abyss. So it does have it feels better that way. I was like, oh
That's
wow,
true.
I don't hate Rail Canyon like I do in Heroes, where I'm like, I just would never want to I never want to deal with that level, but you have to. Here I'm like, oh, this is fine. But yeah, it's certainly not the best level in the game.
Is anything better in the original? So like City Escape and Generations, I feel like it had its moment in Generations, but like it's not as good as the Adventure 2 one.
No, I can't think of any of the levels that were better in the originals. I think Shadow Generations does a great job. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. And particularly like the Sonic Adventure 2 levels, because Space Colony Arc and Radical Highway are excellent bookends, and they're fantastic. They're very showy. They've got like fun set piece moments that a lot of the best Sonic levels tend to have. But they each have, you know, interesting, the way that they use the mechanics, those two levels in particular, being where they are in the game, the beginning and the end. They use the levels and the powers differently, and the way, you know, there's with speedrunning, there's two sets of times. There's the regular time, and then there's a separate time for if you have your Doom powers equipped.
Yeah, and they kind of did that in Frontiers in one of the DLCs, right? If you use the
it's a lot like
boost
that
plus dash, yeah, you get a different.
They're like
time.
figuring it out, and you with the Doom powers, the full Doom wings, which I feel a little bit like I'm spoiling, but I'm like, that was also part of the marketing from day one, is like you have Doom wings. It's basically supersonic, the way that it works. Like you can't fly, you just sort of glide, and you're always losing rings, and also it's tied to your boost. So it's like, oh, this is so powerful for a second.
Right.
But if you can keep it going, like a speedrunner probably could, or if you get very good at the level, then that would be sweet. But yeah, I think the two Sonic Adventure 2 levels would be my.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that it's a great opening, it's a great ending. That means in total, all of Generations, it feels like the game that's represented the most is Adventure 2, which is kind of funny. But I will say also, like, entering Kingdom Valley, like seeing like how well it played. Yeah, like that is a great level,
good.
and it immediately made me go, oh my god, I want them to remake Sonic 06, like the whole game like this.
You know, also,
yes.
You know, also because that level is very faithful. That's like the most faithful level. It's like straight up the layout minus the silver part. It's like almost exactly the same path and routes that are available to you in 06, whereas the other levels kind of remix them a little bit. Kingdom Valley is pretty straightforward. Like, I didn't expect the eagle to be as recurring in this version as it is in 06, but you are. How sentient are the eagles in the Sonic universe? On a scale from Flicky to Jet the Hawk, Smoovies,
Right.
What would you say from like a lore angle is the eagle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it Soar the Eagle from Sonic Boom?
Ooh. Oh. Right. I think eagles are a bit more in tune than your average Flicky. That's what it feels like.
I mean, in real life, eagles are actually very, very stupid. It's a perfect animal for America, you know, to represent us. Yeah.
Take that, eagles.
We should have chosen the turkey. We should have listened to old Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
We'd be in a very different place right now. Because then Sonic Shadow would have been flown over with the turkey.
Gobble, gobble.
Do you think it was weird that there were no Shadow the Hedgehog 2005 levels in the Shadow game? Especially like since the last level could have been like the Doom or the Comet, you know, the Black Comet could have.
That would have made a lot of sense. I mean, because Black Doom and the Black Arms are so central to the story, the premise and as the villains, I feel like that kind of makes up for it. But at the same time, yeah, it would have made a lot of sense for it to be a final level. Or yeah, what's like the Shadow 05 level that you think should have been in there?
I think the Doom, right? Isn't that the name of the Black Comet level?
Yeah,
don't
well, I mean,
remember
there's a couple Black Comet levels that have different names, but like the Doom is, I mean, that one works as well as any of the other names for that level, right? Because there's one, I don't remember the names of all those levels. They all kind of bleed together, just like
Yeah.
how Westopolis looks like Central City in that game
Yeah.
because it's exactly the same. Yeah, I mean, that would probably be the level you choose because everything else, it's like there's the Prison Island level. They could have been weird and picked Circus Park,
Yes.
and have that stick out just like it stuck out in that game. Because even though they're like, there is definitely a feeling of cohesion. Like it all feels like it kind of belongs together, even though they're levels from different games, and it probably helps. Like it really is only a handful of games that we're playing with to begin with. And I like there's future levels in there, which is what I always wanted in Generations, and we get two in here, partly because it's 2024, but I'll say like right when Generations came out, it felt a little silly that one of the levels was colors because it's like we just got that the year before,
Right. Just happened.
but here like I don't feel the same way with Chaos Island. I'm like, oh, I like that it's here, and maybe it's because Shadow wasn't part of that game, and also Chaos Island like plays by very different rules than a normal Sonic level. Like in Colors, when you go through Planet Wisp, it's a regular Sonic level, and then in Generations, it's just another regular Sonic level.
Yeah.
Here, it's like it's a different interpretation of how to exist in Chaos Island, and I think that's why it doesn't bother me at all that it's repeated, and even though we just had that game.
Man,
So
Yeah.
Generation should have ended on Asteroid Coaster. It makes more sense thematically as a last level.
Yes, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Well,
yes.
I mean, one of the things I also like about Shadow is like the last level is Radical Highway. It didn't even and I guess like isn't it a thing where two levels unlock at once? So you could technically like go to Kingdom Valley or Sunset Heights first.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And but in Generations, like we have to start with Sonic 1 and it has to end in Colors. Here, at least they went the last level doesn't have to be the last game that came out. It could be, and going back to Sonic Adventure 2, it makes sense thematically for Shadow, even though technically, I guess it should be Westopolis, because why would Black Doom know what Radical Highway is? That's not important to him.
How about Sunset Heights though? That level also great.
Looks so good.
Really every Shadow stage is
It's a proper level. It never was a proper level before.
yeah.
It's more than a minute and a half. And
It's
I'm like,
also gorgeous. Like it looks
Yes.
fantastic.
It does. I'm excited to try it on Switch when that releases tomorrow to see how that, I mean, it'll play at 30 frames, but supposedly it's a very solid 30 frames, and all of the Sonic games on Switch have been that, so it should be fine. But I am curious to see how that works. But yeah, favorite stage for you, Smoovies, did you say?
Oh, it's Kingdom Valley Act 1.
Yeah.
It's too fun.
Yeah.
Played it over and over. Even after I'd gotten everything and S ranked, I was like, I'm gonna play it again.
The music remix on that is quite good. I listened to those while I worked today.
jam into Sonic.
I didn't really touch the Generation side that much. I played the first level. I saw my Sonic Jam Legacy skin, and then it plays the cutscene. The skin's not there on the cutscene. I'm like,
Yeah, that killed me too.
Right. I want full skins.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't fiddled with any of the skins yet. I haven't turned on Terios. I didn't even see I guess there's a Sonic Adventure skin too. I haven't looked at that. That is there, right?
The Sonic Adventure Legacy skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did turn that on, but same thing as the Sonic Jam skin. It doesn't appear in the cutscenes, only in the levels. So it just doesn't. When you're looking at them from behind most of the time, it doesn't make a huge. It's kind of, it's cool. It's cool. I'm not gonna say it's not cool. It is cool, but I ended up turning it off. even though I theoretically paid for it. But I guess okay, it's fine.
Right. The cutscene, I mean, all those cutscenes are done in game. They should be dynamic. But maybe that's also, since I don't know the inner workings of original generations, it might just be a limitation. Like, it's a movie file. We just got to play a file, and it's like, I mean, like, it's a completely different team, but that was a complaint with Colors Ultimate. Like, they just took the old cutscenes, even though they still had all of the raw data, and it's since been modded where like, oh, here it is, if it looked better for Ultimate. But yeah, okay, well, that I mean, that's unfortunate, but I guess those skins are just meant to be like the cherry on top, like the real meat of this banana split, because there's always meat in a banana split.
Yeah.
I want to say that Generations feels kind of like tacked on to this new Shadow game, to be honest. Didn't they say like they made Shadow Generations because of Shadow in the new movie? Like, didn't I read that in an interview?
Yeah.
That has to be true.
Yeah, like it felt like before the game came out, it's sort of Izuka restaking his claim on the character of Shadow, because the movie people are going to essentially do whatever they want, like when it comes to Shadow. Sure, there's a couple things that Sega will be like, you can't do this, you can't do that, but they have a lot of free reign. And it did feel like Izuka wanted to say, hey, like, this is real Shadow, like SA2, Shadow 05, like, just to reaffirm it all. But man, even if it came from just like that desire, maybe Sonic Team should make more things where they're like, yeah, let's restake our claim on this thing, out of spite almost, because then they seem to, if they're doing their best work out of spite,
it's like classic Sega.
Yeah, if they made a Knuckles series then out of spite,
yeah,
a Knuckles sports series even
Knuckles
would be fine.
A Knuckles bowling game.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I goad them into a Burning Rangers thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You should do that. You'd be like, everyone will give you a kiss, Izuka, if you
Yeah, he had nothing to do with it. That's the problem.
Oh yeah, he was too busy.
But do you think that they just did a remaster of Generations to tack onto this Shadow game? Like they were like, oh, we can't just do the Shadow. What if we also attached this remaster?
That's interesting.
I bet the stuff was in the pipeline before they got competent. So they have on their schedule, okay, if this sells well enough, we're going to do the next reissue in the off cycle when a mainline game isn't coming out. Okay, we did Colors, that sold well enough that's going to greenlight Generations. And then the movies are a big success, and they say, oh, we got to tie into the movies this time because we whiffed on number 1 and we whiffed on number 2. What can we do to not whiff this time? And this was the result. And it's weird to see them competently executing again, or were they ever, would be a hot take. But I think they're doing it now.
Yeah.
It feels like a different Sonic team. Like, I didn't dive in too deeply. I saw somebody mention like one of the main level designers
of Generations is the director of this game.
Yeah.
Right. And
then there's Colors people and people that were then subsequently on the like Sonic and Mario, or Mario and Sonic Olympics games.
Yeah.
But notably absent as well in that very same Twitter thread that I think you're referring to is our dear friend, I mean, that we've never met, but imaginary friend, Morio Kishimoto, the director of Sonic Frontiers,
right,
who was very active. No special thanks or anything.
Right.
Are fans reading into that, or is there?
Oh, is his name not in the credits at all?
At all?
Not even a
wow.
special thanks.
Not even in the special thanks.
Right. Well, that's it. I mean, my assumption is that he is busy working on Frontiers 2, and so when you think about it, like, okay, so he's making Frontiers, then they hired RZS to make Superstars, and then this other team using the Sonic Team name, like, oh yeah, they're also working on something, and clearly there has to be some sort of cross communication. There's too much
Yeah.
in Shadow Generations DNA to be like they weren't even thinking about Frontiers. Like clearly they were, but
If I had to venture a guess, though, this is
Mhm.
in a sort of response to Sonic Colors Ultimate, which they outsourced
Oh,
to
yeah.
Blind Squirrel, and then that port remaster was handled pretty poorly, right?
Yeah.
And then this one was internally.
Mhm.
This generation's remaster, which seems to have gone well, nobody has any complaints really. Some people are complaining about the new cutscenes. Who gives a shit? We can like really talk about those very thinly sliced lines of dialogue if you want to, but maybe next week or maybe later or maybe never, because the amount of exchanges I've seen on Twitter already make me want to
Right. No,
eat a cyanide pill.
right. The
It
biggest
is
issue.
weird though if
Oh.
they're not giving Kishimoto a special thanks, but maybe it's in response to everyone in the world got thanked in Superstars credits. So maybe they're like, okay, we got to scale it back a little bit. Somebody has to be left out. Superstars had 2 sections of special thanks in which they give the player thanks. Like,
Oh yeah.
actually, the Superstars credits were legitimately funny. Like, it's like a Family Guy joke where it's just like, oh, okay, I get it. You're repeating the same thing over and over again. Okay, hot. And then it like actually does become funny. Yeah.
Right.
It would also, maybe Kishimoto is like the guy in Office Space who like they would forget about him. He just directed this game, but it's like they kind of like he doesn't get the birthday cake. He's just like he's working as hard as he can and interacting on Twitter. But they're like, did we? All right, I think we got everybody. We got HR, we got accounting, we got payroll, janitorial, we got everybody. And then Kishimoto's just like, oh, maybe I could. Oh, it's okay. Don't worry. Never mind. I go back to my desk. That's my imaginary freaking yeah. So it does feel like new blood. It does feel like a new team. It does feel like it almost feels like a Nintendo release with the amount of like polish around it. It definitely didn't feel like Sonic Colors Ultimate this time around.
Right. Did anyone run into like any sort of weird glitches, like, or has it just been smooth sailing?
I think what's the ability where you can travel through the corruption slime? It's called morph, or what is it?
Yeah, Doom morph.
Yeah, that's it.
Sure. I think the grappling / home attacking the little corruption orbs is a little janky, but other than that, everything else is fine.
Yeah. No, that is. I also feel like the Doom surf is not as finely tuned as I would like some of the turns. I think I notice it more in the hub world where like you have the little collectibles, the little there's like nuts and bolts hiding out, and you see it. It's like, oh, I just missed it. Let me turn around real fast, and you just end up circling around it for 5 minutes because you just can't figure out like something like that.
I think that happen.
Yeah, and I'm like, I feel like this should be just slightly better.
Because there's no cyber loop to like give you that fine-tuned control.
Oh, yeah.
So you end up like spinning in like this larger circle than you intend to.
Yeah, so you just a little fun. Because to make a comparison to Bowser's Fury, like when Mario jumps on the dinosaur Plessy or whatever their name is, like that feels just slightly better in terms of surfing about on water. But it's like
barely.
If the biggest complaints are a couple of the abilities are a little funny sometimes and not, oh, occasionally you'll just fall through the ground. Like that's a big jump when it comes to what's wrong with Sonic. And so like it's those little things that isn't going to spoil the enjoyment or make me go, oh, they shouldn't have put it in there. It's like,
Yeah, there's no little rocks on the ground when you go boosting over them, go soaring into the air like in Frontiers.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah. So I just really like that hub world.
David, it's called an open zone.
An open zone. But that's why I wish they had given Sonic one as well, because I'm like, I want more.
Yeah.
And you've given me one. You should have given me two. And then I can scold someone. Not Kishimoto. He had nothing to do with this, clearly.
Well, so there are clearly there's parallels between Sonic and Shadow Generations, but there's also interesting parallels too between Shadow Generations and Sonic Frontiers. In the gameplay sense and in the levels, because there is the sense of I guess also like Generations, but it's literally rebuilding old levels and, making them work. And then also in the story sense, it's characters taking stock of where they've been up until this point, and then being like, okay, this is who I am as a character. This has been my whole deal. And now going forward, I guess I'm going to try to be someone different, which we have not seen. But so far, every character now, Shadow, and then Team Sonic, Amy, they've all reflected
Right.
and figured out how their gameplay works unique to the others. And then what happens next could be, I don't want to say Sonic Adventure 3 is going to come out, bring about the resurrection of God on Earth, and be the end of civilization as we know it. But Sonic Adventure 3 maybe it just feels like they're ready for something big.
Yeah. I mean, I have after Frontiers and after this, I may have really high expectations for Frontiers 2 / we'll call it Adventure 3. We can be bold. Like I it feels like they've learned a lot. Like they learned a lot of things while they were working on Frontiers in the wake of Lost World and Forces. And they're like, okay, and they've also learned things, I feel, in Shadow Generations. The boost levels that exist, the 2D levels that exist, they like those are really they're really fun to play as. I know some of the levels design is just taken from what they were originally, but there's a lot of things that are mixed up. So they, to me, even feel better. They feel better than the cyberspace levels, because those were just direct copy and paste. Aside from what the last handful, which were, hey, we're just getting weird. Like that felt like an experiment. This feels more like we've got it. And so if the next one is really big hub world, or a couple hub worlds that are, they might be smaller, but there's a few to go through, and you get the boost levels that are Shadow Generations quality, and if they continue the trajectory of what they've been doing story wise, that could really be a game that lives up to the name Adventure 3. And it's like, wow, they're learning things. And hopefully Sega doesn't do what they normally do when they learn a bunch of things and go, now let's do something else, which is what they did with Lost World, where they went,
no. This is very different, because you're absolutely right. This time, I think maybe what's different, in addition to them having learned lessons, is that the money faucet has been turned on.
Yeah. Oh,
they have mentioned this before too, that because of the success of the movies, they've decided that there is value to the brand, and they're going to devote resources to it, which was news to Kishimoto, because he was like, oh, I've been working, with no resources. And Izuka's like, I put myself in the hospital making Sonic Heroes, but now they're getting resources, and it's showing on, and it's paying off.
But it is really heartening that they're building on Frontiers, because my worry was they would somehow break what made Frontiers work, because Frontiers is 5 drunks leaning on each other and somehow walking forward. And if one of the drunks is walking straight, it's not going to work.
Right.
But
everyone in Sonic Team is still drunk, and they're going to stay drunk until they retire.
Kind of a lore thing, but another interesting parallel between Frontiers and Shadow Generations, both star hedgehogs who are getting corrupted by evil alien powers, who then take in those powers and unleash them back against the aliens. Is Sonic an ancient? Maybe.
Oh.
Are hedgehogs something? Maybe. Still, I love the line, and it's in Dark Beginnings. It's in the game, I think, of just anytime they refer to Shadow as a hedgehog, or that he looks like a hedgehog, I just love, because no, he doesn't.
No. Right. Oh, let's see. There is one thing that I wanted to bring up story-wise, and it's just about the very first cutscene in relation to Dark Beginnings. Very simple question. Do they contradict each other?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Right, because the first thing out of Shadow's mouth, I'm like, that's not what happened in the cartoon. We saw that. Oh, I guess we could just casually mention, we don't have to get into it, is that the PlayStation 5 version, it does have the animatic of Dark Beginnings. It's about 4 minutes longer. And there's a lot of things in there that I'm like, that there's some character stuff where it feels like maybe they should have kept that.
Yeah,
I can understand a couple choices, but there are a couple other choices where I'm like, they really should have kept this and that. And it feels more cohesive, even a couple lines where I'm like, ugh. Wait, for the final version, I'm like, for some reason they work better here. And it
I
makes
totally
more,
agree.
yeah. So
Yeah, I watched them on YouTube, the full animatic, and
mhm.
yeah, I liked it a lot more. It definitely did, like, it was easier to follow. It was, yeah, everything you just said.
Whoa. Right. You know what's easy to follow? Act 2 from Act 1.
The Act 2s though in this game, for real, like it kind of makes me want to see like a full 2D ish game, or like this, like that, like 2.5D perspective that you're getting from a lot, like that. It's very cool. It just looks great. Oh, that's the other thing. When you're talking about like what Frontiers 2 might be, it's important to remember too, that Frontiers looks like shit, and this game looks awesome. All the
Oh.
shadow stages look great.
Yep.
They look phenomenal. They just, and just Frontiers doesn't. But imagine all the good things about Frontiers, but looking good with that glow up.
But does it look as good as Sonic Unleashed did on, I don't know, what's the latest thing you can play Sonic Unleashed on? When we were playing it at your house.
Yeah, on Xbox,
It
I
looked
would say this looks
fantastic.
better. Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
but you have to make sure that you go into the options, switch it away from graphics mode into performance mode, so that you get that 60 frames, and then it looks better.
I had something to say about the contradiction that David brought up earlier too. Is that like he launches up into space in the cartoon, and then the first cutscene in the game, Rouge calls him, and Shadow's like, "Yeah, I've only been up here 1 hour." And Rouge is already at Sonic's party. She's like, "So, how much longer are you gonna be on the Ark? You coming to this party or what?" It's like, bitch, you got to that party like an hour ago at least, like, or at most. Like, what are you talking about?
All right.
I guess he's gonna teleport down to the party. If he can teleport down, then couldn't even teleport it up. Why did he have to take a rocket ship? Doesn't Sonic Adventure 2 imply that he chaos controls up to the Ark? He steals an emerald from the bank. We don't see him again until he's on the Ark when Robotnik meets him up there.
How the characters get places in Adventure 2, you should not think about too hard.
there was a teleporter in Eggman's base. Rouge,
yeah,
we did see
she
Rouge turn it on.
that too.
Right, because presumably Eggman had another teleporter up on the Ark. How else would he gotten back and forth?
Yeah.
Maybe Shadow was like, "Oh, the teleporter's broken. I'll fly up there, and then I'll use the teleporter to go home, and I'll teleport right in the middle of Sonic's birthday, and I'll steal the chili dog that Tails gave him, and I'll be like, this is mine. Oh, I'm so rude." But now he can't do that because he had an Ark. Or maybe he still would. It's fine.
I do like that Rouge is like, "There's free food." What are you talking?
That's right. It's yeah, like the story, because I know I've seen people complain about Ian's rewrites for the Sonic side of things, but on the Shadow side, I feel like almost all of it makes sense to me. Just the way it feels, the way things are set up, without getting too deep into it. It just feels like a whole story. Like here it is. Here's the beginning, middle, and end. Although, hey, guess what? Generations also has to end. So, but
yeah, my personal opinion is that Ian Flynn has done phenomenal work here, and that like the fan, like I do think that it's just like fans looking to complain about anything. Like they'll just sort of find something, because this is what I think we longtime fans have been hoping for, this level of cohesion and level of, deference and respect to the original Sonic Team source material, and having that be the authority above Saturday morning cartoons. Like, we're not throwing all of this out to be, trying to tie into the Sonic Prime canon or the movie canon. Like, this is the vision of Sonic, and it feels confident, and the vision of the gameplay really, really comes through in Shadow Generations of like what they think Sonic is. And it's a unique kind of package, even if it is just like bumper to thing to dash ring to stomp to the, like, it's kind of got this rhythm to it, but it does have a rhythm. Whereas before, those elements were there, but it was some, pretty bad rhythm, I guess.
Right. So before it was like Elaine Bennis,
Right.
and
Now it's like
Prince.
yes.
That's
What more can you say, really?
right.
Okay, so
Do you think Prince ever played Sonic?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do think that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at the mailbag to wrap things up. While I open up the mailbag, let's check in with Rings of Saturn, which is taking a Saturn hiatus, as I understand it, as we heard last week. Bo, how is the 3DO show going?
Well, boy, I don't know if I expected the 3DO post to go viral to a huge audience of mass consumers. I guess there's the reason why the 3DO failed commercially. Nobody has it or remembers it positively or anything else. It's kind of a middling reception to that thing. But I enjoyed it. This is not about the reader. This is about me having fun. But next week I'm bringing it back to the Saturn, and I have the thematically appropriate House of the Dead hacking article. So House of the Dead, it's in the arcades, and they bring it to the home console. And before they issued it on the home console, they put out a demo disc. It's a dual demo disc. Burning Rangers, House of the Dead, final couple of games coming out on the Saturn. You get these two together if you live in Japan. And that demo disc is from a couple of months before they had everything nailed down. You only get to play about 2 minutes of it. But I just took that time limit off, and you can see what they were working on. The unfinished product, and it's kind of different from the final. And what's nice about House of the Dead is it's on rails, and I could just put it side by side with the final, and you can see frame by frame what's different. So
wow.
That's coming for the Halloween. You can be scared of these jump scares that have unfinished bad guys coming at you.
That's right. Oh yeah, I guess this is Sonic Weekly's Halloween episode
next week.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll be recording on Halloween. I don't know if that'll work, actually.
That's
we'll
right.
Have a lot of,
yeah, right.
Right. Halloween is a week from today, so
so I guess
we got a
happy Halloween.
That's right. We didn't even talk about, hey, what's your favorite, scariest Sonic?
Well, next year.
It's not of the warehouse.
Next year. Okay.
Okay, so we've got a question from the mailbag. Here we go. From K9 Biscuits. Question for the podcast. Which acclaimed movie director or team would you have write a Sonic game?
Michael Mann.
Michael Mann.
Whoa.
I'm thinking Heat.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
sure.
It's been a while.
What more could you want from...
And what are you envisioning the Michael Mann
I'm mostly envisioning
Sonic?
Really just Al Pacino being involved somehow. It's really less to do with the director.
Okay. Yeah. Would Al Pacino be would it take place in the Sonic universe of the movies where Al Pacino could be a human, with Tom and Maddie?
I just want to have him really overacting.
Yeah.
And issuing sounds the way post 1990s Al Pacino does.
He could be a great villain, I think. He could, if Jim Carrey decides to actually retire and they need to figure out who's another villain besides Robotnik, Al Pacino playing Dr. Pacino.
Dr. Pacino. Wow.
Yeah.
Right. The question was, what movie team would you want to make the next game, right? The game story, not the movie?
Well, yeah, they did say write a Sonic game.
That's curious, right?
Yeah. You could...
But movie either way. Right, because I'm just thinking, what would work and what wouldn't work. For some reason, I was like, what would a Kevin Smith Sonic game look like? What would Sonic even run in that game, or would he just stand around and talk the whole time?
Is it late period Kevin Smith? Because the answer would be bad. It would be really bad.
It'd be that guy who turns into a walrus. What was that movie?
Oh.
Walrus?
Tusk was the name of that
Tusk.
movie. Yes. Um,
Or how about Hoosier Girls? Was that another movie name?
who?
Yoga
Yoga
Hoosiers.
Hoosiers.
Yoga
That was
Hoosiers.
it.
Clerks 3.
Clerks 3, which I still haven't
and,
seen.
Yeah, me
I
either.
heard they're still clerking.
The Wes Anderson Sonic would be really fun. I think a Tarantino Sonic should be illegal. That one shouldn't happen. Greta Gerwig Sonic would be fun. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. Let's see what kind of relationship dynamics they can explore with Sonic and Amy. And
What about like a mumblecore Silver movie?
I'm all for it. Andrew Lugoski.
Right. And of course, there's always John Carpenter. Can't forget that.
Oh.
Oh.
Yes, the master of horror himself, the big Sonic
That's
fan.
the answer.
I feel like Ghibli would have been an obvious one to go to, right?
Yeah.
No?
I mean, like,
Miyazaki, the Miyazaki Sonic movie that
Yeah,
exists in
yeah.
our hearts. Sure.
It'd mostly just be Sonic napping. That's like the whole movie. Just napping in a beautiful field
Yeah.
under a tree.
that's what he wants to do. 80
What about,
minutes.
what about the guy who does the Resident Evil movies, Paul W.S. Anderson?
All
right?
right. The other Anderson, yes.
Yeah,
He's,
not the one who did Punch Drunk Love, not Paul Thomas Anderson.
Thomas Anderson.
whoa, right. Oh, that's what, okay. Adam Sandler, he's like, okay, I'm coming in. I'm going to write Sonic Adventure 3.
Tra-ba-da-doo, and then there you get Al Pacino in there.
Right. You have all of
It's Jack
there.
and Jill. It's Jack and Jill, and it's Sonic the Hedgehog.
Right. They did
Jack
Pixels.
X Jill Generations.
What about like
Uh.
a Spike Lee where it like, it's entertaining, but then also like really means something?
Hmm.
Yeah, that'd be great. A social thriller, something that makes you reflect. Speaking of reflecting, I think we can reflect on the end of the podcast, right, David?
Whoa. Oh, here we go.
Here we go, buddy.
Here we go. Yes. That's right. This is a good time to reflect on everything we've talked about over the last hour regarding Sonic and Shadow, but mostly just Shadow because, Shadow, he likes to examine his history. And if you like to get amnesia and then think about your life story over and over again, why, then maybe this was the 7th time that you've listened to this episode of Sonic Weekly. That's right. The only weekly Sonic podcast with the word Sonic and Weekly in the name. And if you've enjoyed this and, hey, you want to know when the next episode comes out where we dive in deep to the story and the lore, and we can hear how Bo and Modern Bo enjoyed the gameplay, then be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe to this podcast or using your podcatcher of choice, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Spotify, or if you're an Android faithful, of course, Podcast Addict. Download it today, trademark. There, you can rate it, you can review it, you can do all that fun stuff that helps us out. But if you don't even want to deal with a podcatcher, we are also over on YouTube at Sonic-Weekly, which also has gameplay footage from a friend of the show, Jack of Old Games. So tantalize your ears and your eyes at once. If you want to get in contact with the show, you can always drop us an email at sonicweeklypodcast@gmail.com. We do have the mailbag section. We'll read what you write. If it's a question, if it's just a statement, maybe not. But you can email us to ask for a link to our Discord server. We'll send that over to you where you can talk to like-minded Sonic the Hedgehog fans about all sorts of things, including Sonic the Hedgehog. Oh, that's a good time. If you're able to manage it, we also have a Ko-fi or a Ko-fi, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's just Sonic Weekly, where you can either drop in a tip or you can subscribe and become one of our executive producers, who are, at the moment, Pig Dan, Pabsy, Sonicu, Saving Throws, and Cal Bagarian. I think it's $5 a month, but it's whatever you can, whatever you can afford. Hey, you get some extra goodies from wife of the grant, Ashlyn. If you go to the site, you can look it up there. That just helps defer costs of production and hosting and all of that fun stuff so that we can keep on bringing you Sonic conversation week after week after week. And if Shadow was here, we just repeat the exact same conversation we had today, next week, and the week after, and the week after that. We had no guest, so I can't thank anyone. But of course, I can thank in person Smoovies for the edit. He's the one who puts this together, makes it sound good.
Thank you, Smoovies.
And of course, gotta thank Bo.
Thank you, Bo.
And I gotta thank Grant.
Thank you, Grant.
That's right. Grant, you should thank yourself more, because I think that at the end of the day, Sonic X Shadow Generations teaches us that we should learn to love ourselves, right? I think that's the moral of every Sonic game, actually.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something there, David. David, thank you for hitting on that there, right there at the end of the episode. Thank you, David. Let's all love ourselves, David.
That's right. Sonic, he can look at himself and give himself a big old kiss in Generations.
Sonic's so fast he can kiss outward and then run around and receive the kiss.
That's right.
That's what Sonic can do. He's so fast. All right. Let's get out of here. Goodbye. Happy Halloween.